President Xi of the Chinese Communist Party says this virus is a demon and we cannot allow this demon to hide. The 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, says nothing is inevitable. That means through human action and human agency, the United States of America, the can-do country, the indispensable nation, will get through this. The question is, how quickly and what's on the other side? Welcome to War Room Pandemic. We're live from Fort Defiance, hard against the Supreme Court of the United States on Capitol Hill. It is Thursday, the 2nd of April, the year of our Lord 2020. Now with over 5 million downloads on our podcast, and we're everywhere, ubiquitous, live on the John Fredericks Radio Network, live on American News, the streaming platform for the Trump movement. It's now Dish, Channel 219 on Newsmax TV, FM 99.1 and 103.9 in Chicago. Also throughout the world on the Nexus IRS system, AM radio, ham radio, shortwave radio, medium wave radio. Every night we get the input from Israel, from Africa, Latin America, Russia, Eastern Europe, India. And later in the day, subtitled into Mandarin and blown through the firewall to the VPNs, to the people of China, old 100 names, the hardworking, decent, tough people in China, suppressed by the most dictatorial power we have seen since the Nazis in the 1930s. That would be the Chinese Communist Party. Every day on Mandarin, subtitled, this show goes out, and the feedback we've gotten from the Chinese people is absolutely extraordinary. As you know, I've been broadcasting to China for many years now. We're now honored to be joined by an individual, a gentleman who served his country for many, many decades and now decided to serve it again. Admiral Ronny Jackson, who was President Trump's, I guess, chief medical officer in looking out for him in the White House. Spent many good days with the Admiral, a good man, a solid man, running now in Texas 13 in the Amarillo area. Admiral, thank you very much for joining us on War Room Pandemic.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Good to hear from you again.
Listen, tell us what's the state of play on this thing down in Texas? What exactly is the governor doing, or what are we doing? Are we shelter in place? Are we locked down? I know Texas, the Republic of Texas. Texicans are tough folks and don't like taking orders from Washington D.C. But exactly what's going on down there?
Well, yeah, that's true, and that's kind of one of the things we had to overcome a little bit. I think the governor yesterday kind of issued a shelter-in-place order. It may not have been officially called shelter-in-place order, but that's essentially what it is, and I think it's consistent with what's going on in other places in the country. But that was as of, I think the 31st was yesterday, or maybe this morning at midnight was when that went into effect. But prior to that, we've had some of the big cities. In the district I'm in 13, there's just two big cities, really, Amarillo and Wichita Falls. And the mayors from both of those cities had already issued basically shelter-in-place orders for the citizens in that area. So people are starting to realize that there's going to be an extension of this. It's going to last, per the president's direction, for at least another 30 days. This is going to last, and so I think people are gradually accepting it now. It was a little hard for them to accept in that part of Texas because we're just not seeing cases up there like they are in New York and stuff, right? So it really hasn't hit home. In the district I'm in, like it has in areas in the Northeast. So, but I think people are doing what they can. They do care about their neighbors up here. They're very patriotic, and they're very, adamant about following whatever the president directs them. This is Trump country up here, so people are going to follow his lead.
What as a medical professional, and particularly from the Navy, given how outstanding the Navy's understanding of this is, we got the UNS. The president sent the USNS Comfort up to New York City. You got the Mercy in Los Angeles. What's your assessment of this virus and where we stand right now?
Well, I think it's just a lot of this is unknown, and I think that we may look back and we may see a lot of this was overreaction, but we just don't know yet. So I think everybody's being adopting the better safe than sorry kind of mode right now. It's a novel virus. So the danger it presents is that we don't have any immunity to it. We don't currently have any medications that we know work on it, and we don't have a vaccination for it. Otherwise, I think if we had those things in place, it wouldn't have much of an impact beyond what, say, seasonal flu would. So I think that hopefully when this is all said and done, the mortality rate is going to be really low on this. I think the denominator is huge. I think there are tons of people out there that already have this that had no idea they had it. They've already it's already left their system. They have antibodies for it now. There are a lot of people out there that got minor illnesses and stuff that ended up having this that didn't even know it. So I think once we factor that known denominator into this, I think the mortality rate is going to be really low. And I'm not saying this is the flu, but I think the mortality is going to be close to what the flu is, down around 0.1% when this is all said and done. But we just don't know, and that's why it's a scary virus in the sense that what it could do. And
what do you think? Antibodies is something we've been pushing here. How do you get an antibody test, and how do you mass deploy that? Because if you find out the way to unlock the economy, I think is exactly what you're talking about. You got to find out who's actually had this, who's got the antibodies, because those people are kind of impervious to it. You can start opening back up the economy. As a medical professional, how do you think we go about that?
Yeah, I think it was yesterday. They mentioned, Dr. Bricks had mentioned that the academic centers around the country right now already have the capability to do that, and they need to step up to the plate and start trying to to do that. But we do. You're right. At some point, we have to identify those people who have the immunity, so that we can, especially if this continues to spread it to places around the country like it is in New York. We have to know who's got immunity to this, so we can put them back to work and they can go on about their business and and support our medical industry and our healthcare industry and our economy and stuff without worrying about getting the illness. So I think they're probably looking at that as we speak right now about how they start engaging labs and stuff out there that can already do this, to get them to go ahead and do that, because it will make a difference in a lot of communities.
Admiral, this is Jason Miller. I have a question for you. You're, of course, known as President Trump's personal physician, the doctor right there in the White House who's looking after him. Without giving away any state secrets here, how would you, if you were still in the White House, how would you be changing the president's day-to-day schedule and day-to-day interaction with top staffers, cabinet officials, members of the public to keep him safe? And what are some of the safety protocols that are in place that we might not be aware of, whether it's the president or vice president, to support the chain of command within government?
Well, I think that they're probably doing most of this right now, but the thing is, it's just essential personnel only. You guys are familiar with how things work at the White House and stuff, and a lot of times who's going to brief on something, there'll be, 4 or 5 other strap hangers, people that don't actually have to be there, that are tagging along for support to potentially answer questions if the primary person
that's the Jason Millers of the world.
It just has to be essential personnel.
That's the Jason Millers of the world. Don't mean to.
That's what we call a full heckle, Admiral.
No, Admiral, I want to go now to the. You got something, Jack?
I wanted to ask him, and maybe you were about to ask him about the Teddy Roosevelt being a Navy admiral and understanding how infections might flow through a ship. My question is this. When you look at the mortality rates that came out of Italy, they had 1 person so far under the age of 29 die, and I think as of last Friday, there were 7 people under 39 who had died. Does it make sense to pull a first-line aircraft carrier out of the zone when you have a population on board that ship that likely will not really suffer too many harsh consequences statistically? And also, it seems to me that would be a great proving ground for the prophylactic use of the hydroxychloroquine, which we're seeing, for example, the entire Indian medical profession is taking it right now.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I mentioned that earlier today. I was talking to some folks about that, and I said people don't need to worry about that carrier. That carrier is filled with young, healthy people that are either going to get this and not even know they had it, or they're going to do really well with it. And now, as far as pulling it off, off station and sequestering those people, I guess that's really just a big national security picture issue. But I think if you have the ability to pull into Guam and offload these people separate, and watch them for 14 days, and then get them back to work with the reassurance that the virus is not going to spread all over the ship. I think it's probably worth doing, and I think that's what they're doing now. They're saying there's only about 100 people on board the ship that have tested positive. They're going to take 3,000 of the 5,000 crew members off, put them into hotels that have already been set aside in Guam, so that they can sequester them and watch them for a few days, and then get them back to work as quickly as possible, I think. And I was also making the point today, if something happens and that ship is needed as a ship of war, it has to go to war, those people will get back on that ship regardless of what's going on with coronavirus, and they'll do their job, and they'll be able to do it effectively. Some of them may not feel 100% if they have flu symptoms and stuff, but they will be ready to fight if they need to. So I'm not really worried about that, but
Yeah,
I think they'll do well.
The Chinese Communist Party's got to understand if this ship needs to be back in the South China Sea, it'll be in the South China Sea. My destroyer was in Guam for a while when we were patrolling the South China Sea. You can get there pretty quickly. So the CCP should know you got a major Navy combatant that's on the ready. Last question, because I know you got to bounce. I want to talk about the Saudis, unrelated to this virus, unrelated to this pandemic. The Saudis and Russians pulled this effort to destroy basically the American fracking industry. How is that playing out in Texas, and what do Texans think that ought to be done about this?
Yeah, it's not playing out very well at all. I mean, they crushed the price of oil, and I think when that happened, the timing was so obvious that this was intended to provide some kind of death blow to our economy and stuff. So I didn't appreciate it. I know the folks in oil and gas up in the Panhandle of Texas, they don't appreciate it one bit. And I don't know what we should do. I mean, I was hearing folks talking the other day. Maybe we should do something where we only refine oil that's coming from within the United States and refuse to process foreign oil, things of that nature. I don't know, but I think there needs to be this to prop up the oil and gas industry right now and to make it exclusive to oil and gas coming from this country right now, in light of the fact that they, what I would say, pretty obviously tried to injure our economy.
Admiral, one more question for you. You're, of course, running for Congress out there in Amarillo. You have a July 14th Republican runoff that is coming up. What are you telling folks that you're going to do once you get to Congress about this virus? We got it from the CCP. We've seen Congressman Jim Banks from Indiana push a resolution condemning the CCP. We've seen Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri say he wants to hold hearings. Marshall Blackburn is out there saying that we should be absolved of some of that debt that the Chinese we owe to the Chinese. What are you telling folks that you will do, since we know we got this virus from the CCP and they could have saved lives, but they didn't?
Yeah, no, I'm in support of all of that. I'm in support of doing an investigation, finding out exactly when they knew this was an issue. And, I still am not comfortable that we're getting reliable information from them. Everybody's still comparing the numbers that we have here to the numbers in China. Who knows what's really going on in China? I don't think that we have a good picture for that. And so I'm all about anything we can do to force them to be transparent with things like this in the future and have some kind of economic penalties or a price that they pay if they're not, I think will be effective, and I'll support any of that kind of stuff.
Admiral Jackson, I just want to say you're a great American patriot. We couldn't be prouder that you decided to not retire, but to step up and to go back into Congress and support the President of the United States. I know he feels as strongly about you as we do. You're a patriot and just a great guy. So we want to thank you for taking time to come on the show. We look forward to having you back on often in the future.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. It's Admiral Ronny Jackson running in Texas 13. He's a solid guy. I'm telling you. He knows what the deal is. Down in Texas, I got to tell you, this is outrageous. What's happened to it? Bad. Look, the drop in aggregate demand. You got to make up for that. But what we've allowed, supposedly our allies, what ally? And the Saudis, by the way, we wouldn't have won the Cold War as fast as we won it when President Reagan put us on war footing to take down the Soviet Union. Right, the Saudis were a key to that. They're pumping, but essentially destroyed the Russian oil and gas industry at the time. So they were a central ally. What they've done is not acceptable. Okay, and it's got to be. We need the harshest measures possible so they understand it's not acceptable. And I agree with Jackson and these other people saying it ought to be a complete ban on Saudi oil coming in here, or put a tariff up there that makes it so non-competitive. Right now. It's just outrageous. Okay, hashtag war room pandemic. I want to hear everything you got to say. We got a lot more to go through. We're going to take a short commercial break at War Room Pandemic, at War Room 2020, hashtag 30 Days to Save America. We're going to get into all of that. We return on all of our distribution platforms. War Room Pandemic from Capitol Hill. Be back in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Thursday, the 2nd of April, the year of our Lord 2020, and went through one of the toughest months in American history. We're about another. Breaking news, you're on War Room Pandemic. You're in the War Room from Fort Defiance. The old Breitbart Embassy's been we've taken it over and flipped it into a complete broadcasting center 24 hours a day. Now we found out one of the most infected parts of one of the most infected cities in the country. But hey, That's where we're getting hazardous duty pay. Didn't tell you that, Raheem?
Thank goodness. We're getting paid?
Exactly. Nancy Pelosi, the master political strategist, back at work. You know what? This is what happens when you're 80 years old and you're feeling your oats. What did Nancy just do?
She just put Jim Clyburn in charge of a special committee on coronavirus, and they're going to have subpoena power.
Now, I take it this is not to find a solution for coronavirus. This was announced as a committee. We're getting this pulled right now by the War Room team, so we can hear this. This is a select committee.
Coronavirus as a solution to Trump.
Yeah, no. This is a investigate. I take it's when they say subpoena power. It's
so we have here. So Speaker Pelosi. So put Jim Clyburn, who's the House Majority Whip from South Carolina,
who made Joe Biden the Democratic nominee.
Correct, single-handedly. Pelosi says the select committee will have subpoena power, but makes clear there will be time to consider proposals for an after-action review, possibly 9/11 commission-like regarding the coronavirus. The select panel will be about overseeing what's happening now.
This is equivalent to the Civil War when they had a joint committee on the conduct of the war. They thought fairly quickly. I think it was in the summer of 1861. I might be incorrect. I think it was summer, fall of 1861 after Manassas, or as you Yankees call it, Bull Run. After the massive federal defeat there and almost the taking of Washington. Members of the House, because they all thought Lincoln was incompetent. They thought Lincoln was just a small-time railroad lawyer who had kind of backed into this thing that Seward or one of the the team of rivals, Chase or Seward or one of these heavyweights in the Republican Party should have been the president. Seward had given him a memo that said, "I'll become prime minister. You'll just be a figurehead." They all thought he was incompetent. And the way the war was going initially, they thought he was even more incompetent. The House, which had fire breathers, the abolitionists had fire breathers on there, wanted to actually take charge of things. They thought this was out of control. They did a joint committee. These when you give them, and the House has subpoena power, right? Anyway, so she can, as Speaker of the House, can do this. This is, I think, going to politicize this a little bit.
A little, you think? So here's one of the things. So
that's a shot across somebody's bow, right? In the world of politics.
No, this is a shot across the bow. I mean, this is right upside your forehead. I mean, this is these are speed knots across your forehead here.
Because everybody's in a meeting right now. Everybody. She sent a thing to the apparatus, not just the political guys. She sent a thing to the apparatus. Everything you say, everything you do, every email you've got, every memo, every meeting is going to be deconstructed, and you're going to be sitting there on national TV at some time in the future. And what had she said? A 9/11 type commission act.
Right. And here's the thing, though. Let's go back to the last impeachment, the last go-around. Now, we're not saying it's going to impeachment just yet, but this is clearly Nancy Pelosi, for as much as, Steve, you refer to her as a master strategist, she's very small in her thinking. She is so triggered by her Trump hatred, the TDS, all she can think of is investigate, attack, subpoena, investigate, attack, subpoena, leak to the press over and over and over. Nancy Pelosi may have just gone and reelected Donald Trump because her being so triggered and going to a political moment at this time in our nation's history is reprehensible.
No, the country's got to pull together.
There is going to be, if you want to find a way to rally President Trump's base, if you want to find a way to completely trigger the media, I think a lot of folks in the media will even look and say, man, this really ain't the right time.
Right in the middle of this. I mean, we're starting a month, and look, we've been the biggest advocates of, number one, hard action. If you're going to take this time, hard action. Let's drive this thing out of here. But number two, we've got to get to the other side. And we're saying, hey, we're not buying off on May. I wouldn't concede May right now. I wouldn't concede you got to go to Memorial Day. It's supposed to be 30 days. Let's do a hard 30. Let's get this thing, crush it. Let's do whatever we need to do to get this behind us. And whatever we need to do to build a bridge that gets every citizen, working class people who go to work in uniforms, all of that, get to the other side. This is certainly not the time, I think, kind of inappropriate to be putting out there. We're going to have an investigative committee with subpoena power. What you're doing, and people should, and particularly the Democrats that listen to this, we're trying to depoliticize all this so we get to the other side. What this is going to do is freeze, I think, much of the federal bureaucracy that is obviously working on this day and day, that people are going to looking over my shoulder. Am I going to need to get a lawyer? What can I really be as truthful as I want in some of these emails? Do I have to pull my punches on my recommendations? Because later, remember, what did Joe Norman tell us from Talib's Institute of Complex Systems, the New England Institute of Complex Systems, back on episode 2, I think it was. In complex systems, to solve problems like this, you often have to take draconian action. Sometimes that action may, in hindsight, be overreaction. But at the time that you're doing in the decision, in the milieu, you're making that decision in the fog of war, at that time, it was the right thing to do. Now, because of that, every person working on this in the federal government, over at the Defense Department, every military officer, every person at CDC, everybody at NIH, and that's not even the political appointees, obviously the political appointees, everybody now is looking over their shoulder. They're thinking about, well, hang on. This is what I'm recommending, but maybe later on it looks like it wasn't the right thing. I'm going to have to get a lawyer. I'm going to go bankrupt because I've got to get a lawyer, et cetera. We shouldn't be doing that now. If you and I've said this from the beginning, we're going to adjudicate all this at some time in the future. There'll clearly be a Pearl Harbor Commission. There's clearly going to be a 9/11 This is the biggest thing, one of the biggest things, if not the largest things ever hit the country. We've never shut the country down for 30 days, ever. Obviously, that's all going to be looked at. Now's not the time to adjudicate it. Now's the time to get through this, right? And as people realize in the Civil War, with Abraham Lincoln, that became a massive thorn in his side, right? And many times he just overrode it or wouldn't pay attention to him or moved on, and because he won, they backed off, right? But it was only because he won they backed off. But this is something I think that in a situation where you want to depoliticize it, right? When you want to depoliticize it, it just throws gasoline on the fire.
So there's another thing that the buried lead of buried leads, and Jack Maxey here would call this out because all of us slept on this, even though we were watching the press conference or at various points of it yesterday. Dr. Fauci responding to a question about shelter in place or these social distancing measures and when they will actually let up. And we talk about
keep going.
Talk about throwing a wrench into the gear of things.
But I want to tee this up also.
Yeah. About
Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is a good man, and Dr. Fauci is doing his best. There's no doubt about it. And they now say that Dr. Fauci is got to get some protection, and maybe it's people on the right or left. I don't know, but obviously there's some situations there he has to get protection. And we obviously disagree with anybody that's attacking Dr. Fauci personally or giving him threats. It's just not acceptable. Okay, it's not acceptable. This is a guy that President Trump's got in his inner circle, and my issue with Dr. Fauci from day one is about, and this is a fact that the mainstream media will not address, it's his moving the goalpost. The mainstream media every day is hammering Donald Trump and his team about evidence-based, fact-based, scientist, all of it. You guys have not done nearly the work we've done on this show from the beginning, a month before you even considered this to be a story because you're so obsessed with the impeachment. We said back in January that this is more important. He's going to be a wartime president. You got to pay attention. None of you paid attention. With all your hundreds of millions of dollars of resources and assets, you didn't pay attention, okay? So I don't need you guys coming in now and say evidence-based. We've been evidence-based from the beginning. It is a fact that Dr. Fauci, when he began, on I think one of his very first interviews, said there's nothing to worry about here. And it's all going to come out about what counsel he was giving to the president at that time. My understanding, and I think it's pretty locked on, is that he was not an advocate of shutting down the flights from China and quarantining people, which is still one of the most important, things that have happened in this. It's not an end-all and be-all, but one of the most important things that at least bought us a little bit of time. My issue is when you're evidence-based, I want to be evidence-based. When you're database, I want to be evidence-based. What I still ask Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and Azar, and what we haven't seen yet, the presentation the other day were all I consider the real clear polling of the math that was done here. We've had these on the show weeks before they brought it up the other day. We talked about the University of Washington a week before and talked about what a great system that was and what Dr. Murray and the people were doing. We still don't have, and I would just ask Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, what is the official government's, even if it's got a range? I know you've opined on what the outsiders are, and I'm sure that kind of validates it because you got Stanford, you got Harvard, and we look at the 18 they've talked about. University of Washington, some of the best in the country, Imperial College, others. But what is the evidence-based, data-based thinking of CDC, NIH, in the consortium of units that are working there? We need to see that. We need to see that because it's going to avoid Another movement of the goalposts. Here's what I'm concerned about. It's a lack of focus, and here's why. When Burke sits up there and just throws out full mitigation, right? to please define full mitigation, because I will respectfully submit, and I'm doing this for the good of the cause, this is not full mitigation. I'm not so sure this is even mitigation. I'd like to see that defined. I'd like to see what metrics you're working off of, because the nation's going through this horrific thing. I want to see that. And you have to lay that out. And then I've got the Surgeon General saying, well, hey, this is kind of a national – well, it's not a national shelter in place, right? It's just not. It's not. You've still got a collection of kind of various – some things are harder than others. In San Francisco, they're doing it one way. In other – and look, we're all federalists. We're states' rights people, right? We understand that. But this is a national emergency and has to be looked at, because the whole burden of the debt in the $6 trillion bazooka of the Federal Reserve – what did David Bahnsen said? We're now the United States of the Federal Reserve. This is a national issue. We're going to get back onto it. We're teasing the Fauci moment. That was kind of the buried lead from yesterday. We'll get all back. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Tell us how we're doing and what we're missing and what we should be focused on. We'll be back with the team in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. We're in the middle of it, so let's just get right to the facts. This is episode. What episode were we? Episode 95. I don't think that's correct. I think it's 95. We're going to come back and check. I don't do it. I think 93 was last night. Stephen K. Bannon trying to figure out. Jack Maxey's been running numbers in the entire break on. Been doing the back of the envelope calculation on. It's episode 95. You told me 93, 94 was starting the show. Vish Burra of Staten Island gets blown up here. That's okay. We're episode 95 on the War Room. Seen comments, keep them coming. And by the way, don't be shy out there. If you're on Twitter, by the way, go to the site, make a comment on the site, on the news stories, give us a review. This is your community. We're here just to analyze information, put it out there, and always be cutting edge. I will guarantee you one thing. If you heard it on the mainstream media, you've heard it on the War Room Pandemic a week before. There's not one item that gets out there that we're not analyzing this, because we're looking over the hill, and we're the only place that does the pandemic, the economic crisis, the financial crisis, and now we're pulling in some of the geopolitics of it all about oil. Our allies, in quotes, in Saudi Arabia, they're not allies. I mean, this is absurd what they did and the timing of it, and they should be held accountable for it. Now, they're not enemies like the Chinese Communist Party. That's an enemy, okay? That's an enemy of the Chinese people. It's an enemy of humanity, and it's an enemy of the United States of America. And it's inevitable that how we deal with enemies. Okay, they're already at a full information. They have three types of war. Read Unrestricted Warfare. It's up on our site. It's the book that they laid out back in the 90s, what their plan was. Information warfare, economic warfare, and kinetic. They never want to go kinetic, right? They never want to get into a kinetic war with the United States, because they understand the Roosevelt's right there in Guam. And I don't want to hear about their Navy, all the happy talk on their Navy. It takes you forever to learn how to fight at sea, right? As the Japanese showed us in World War II. At Midway. Okay, I want to pivot now to go to back to Dr. Fauci. We're going to talk about full mitigation. Here's my issue. I think we need to see more data and more analytics. Jack on the WABC show, we're on WABC, and all of these distribution platforms, by the way, John Fredericks and Dish. I think I forgot to say that yesterday, but we have the whole show back at 5, but we kind of put a focus on the Wuhan of America, which is New York City and the tri-state area, because there's so much happening there. Jack Maxey did a pretty good back-of-the-envelope analysis, and Dave Ramaswamy, the guys are going to jump in today, about how the Washington model for New York is we're doing better. In fact, I think we're doing much better.
Significantly better.
Significantly better. Part of that is the operation. Remember, and these things we've said, what's so important is the therapeutics. The therapeutic drugs are going to be, at least in this initial wave, I think what gets us through to the other side, and we ought to be flooding the zone with that. And President Trump got the FDA to give this waiver on the therapeutic of hydroxychloroquine, right? And and I think that's been a big. I believe we're going to find out that's one of the reasons that New York City that they're winning up there.
Hat tip to Jason. He sent me a study that he found last night. They're they've actually published protocols for the use of these antiviral therapeutics at a big hospital in New York City that was published last night. Hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin is in the treatment. I think, as we've been saying for a long time, the key is to begin taking it right at the front end of your symptoms, because it doesn't cure you. It basically just allows the viral load to be suppressed so that your own immunity can take over. It also has a mild sort of anti-inflammatory, anti-immune response to it that tends to suppress your over-immune response that seems to be giving people problems. One other thing that I think it's important people remember, as we look at this mortality rate, and we look at Italy, and we look at Spain, and we look at Germany, and we're all trying to understand why it is that some places seem to have lower mortality rates than others. Something was pointed out to me yesterday that I thought was fascinating. I think it should be illustrative of what we're going to look at in America. Germany has a less than 0.5% mortality rate, but one of the reasons why that is Germany has 2.5 times the number of ICU beds that Italy does. So there is a real difference between getting first-tier care and not. And we've also found out that in China, in the total country, they only had about 25,000 ventilators. So on that basis, I think all Americans should look at, we've been talking about not being prepared, we don't have enough. Listen, if there's any country on planet Earth that is prepared for this, it is the United States of America. And I think we should start to have more confidence in the healthcare treatment that we're going to get. And as this thing evolves, we're getting more and more anecdotal evidence.
Well, when you say that, you don't see Fauci never talks about this. I mean, look, on these afternoon briefings, he talks about a vaccine. I posit that we're never going to have a vaccine. Call me crazy, but we don't have one for AIDS. We don't have one for SARS. We don't have one for MERS. If we have one, it's a miracle, and I think that's great. I believe in miracles, and particularly the biomedical companies in America. If anybody's to get it, I think we will get it. But I consider that when he's talking about the vaccine in 18 months, maybe it will or maybe it isn't. But we have weapons today. They're not perfect weapons, but you fight with the army you have, not with the army you want. What I don't like about Fauci is I never hear Fauci. Fauci is very dismissive of the therapeutics of this. To say, remember, the key gating event is not just the ICU units. It's not just the beds. It's just not the PPE. It's the doctor, nurses, teams. It's critical to keep, both in Wuhan and in northern Italy, what it shows you is you've got to keep those folks alive. They're the troops going across the beach at Normandy. They have to use this, I think, as an upfront prophylactic, right? I hope that that's what's happening, that you're seeing that used. Everybody else should be a therapeutic when you first see the signs, but the prophylactic's got to be the doctor, nurses, teams.
I was speaking to a physician last night up in upstate New York, and they're actually doing okay. And we speak to physicians all the time.
Yeah,
just so you know.
nonstop. We're talking emergency room guys.
It's very often they are not allowed to appear on the air because
they're definitely
they have
not
restrictions
allowed.
with their hospital.
Restriction.
And what have you.
We actually had a couple of doctors on here early that their hospitals jumped on them for actually going on air and telling the truth.
And he said, we were talking about Fauci and the changing game, and I had shared with he and all of his colleagues some of the early research we were finding out about hydroxychloroquine, and these guys literally thank me every day because we were way ahead of this. And the frustration with Fauci and the FDA and all of their prognostications, he had a really interesting way of describing it in the front line. He's a foot soldier. And he said, I look at these guys and the way they talk, and he said, I see what I would describe as the arrogance of the non-combatant expert. The idea of a guy coming out and later criticizing the corpsman's performance on saving a guy's life in the battlefield and defining how it should be done rather than how it actually gets done under combat conditions. So I think that out there in the medical community, these guys have to be nimble. They have to adapt to a changing battlefield every single day. And the inertia and the bureaucracies is holding them back.
The administrative state. And we're not about, blowing things up and taking things apart, but the administrative state here has not had its finest moments. And I want to let's get to Fauci, and then I want to go back and pull the camera back and talk about what we're talking about, that the mainstream media is not focused on. It is central for us winning as a country.
This is from yesterday at 6:38 p.m. Eastern. Dr. Fauci at the White House press briefing.
People looking forward to the summer talk about, going to baseball games, going to concerts. We have political conventions over the summer. Are things like that possible or safe without a vaccine or a treatment in place?
Yeah, I think if we get to the part of the curve that Dr. Birx showed yesterday, when it goes down to essentially no new cases, no deaths at a period of time, I think it makes sense that you're going to have to relax social distancing.
What is that doing? What does that mean?
So should I play it again? It's a
Play it
brief
again.
clip,
It's very important.
I want to make sure that
it's a buried lead.
I want to make sure that people are getting this, because what he's saying is when we get to the point where there are no deaths and none. Here we go.
People looking forward to the summer talk about, going to baseball games, going to concerts. We have political conventions over the summer. Are things like that possible or safe without a vaccine or a treatment in place?
Yeah, I think if we get to the part of the curve that Dr. Birx showed yesterday, when it goes down to essentially no new cases, no deaths at a period of time, I think it makes sense that you're going to have to relax social distancing.
Okay, hang on. To mainstream media, that he's now the oracle, and I'm supportive of Dr. Fauci. This is not some right-wing beatdown of Fauci. It's far from that. We're trying to help assist Dr. Fauci in being ready. Here's what needs to happen. It's just very simple. Number one, when they keep saying about the downside of the slope, Dr. Birx presented a compendium of University of Washington and others of these 18 that they've looked at that tend to, like the Real Clear Politics, gives you directionally of where this is going. We've already seen in Jack's analysis that the New York situation appears, because of actions that they are taking, better than what those numbers show. We need Dr. Birx, and we need Dr. Fauci, and we need whoever it is, the team we need the White House Corona Task Force to lay out a set of numbers, a set of math that comes from the United States, and be backed up and augmented and validated and verified by the Princeton and Harvard and Stanford and the University of Washington, all of that. Okay, but we need a set so we can see what the government's concept of what this is, number one. Number two, we have to have definitionally the concept of full mitigation. We're just throwing terms. They're throwing terms out there. We need to walk through what mitigation is and what full mitigation is. Because now we know that in full mitigation, they're talking about, hey, we're going to already go to May, and the vice president says yesterday it's Memorial Day to the 1st of June. Well, hey, I don't know if we bought off on that, right? People are teasing this. And this is reality, because we just had 6.6 million people today that we know filed for unemployment. It's all part of this is all inextricably linked, but you got to disaggregate to look at. Number two. Number three, we have to look at what the goals and objectives are for this. Dr. Fauci, a goal and objective can't be no new deaths and no new cases. There are going to be, because that is a process. If I go back and assume all of your models that you've used and presented, Jack, I think the no new deaths and no new cases are a long way away, right? A long way away. And it's about marginal utility. There's got to be an objective that we get it at some point, and then antibodies, the antibody testing, the massive distribution of the therapeutic drugs, waiting for a vaccine. We cannot sit here and wait for a vaccine. We have to assume there's never going to be a vaccine. I realize every day you see Johnson & Johnson. Hey, these were all guys also announcing stuff on SARS. Okay? We don't have a vaccine for the common cold. We don't have a vaccine. There are 40 million dead on HIV around the world. There's no vaccine on HIV. We got therapeutics that keep people alive forever. Right? We have therapeutics. There's no vaccines out there. We may have a vaccine. There may be a Jonas Salk right now that's working in a lab that's going to come up with a vaccine, and God bless him, right? Because we need that. But the working assumption has to be there's never going to be a vaccine. You have to have a plan that says there's not going to be a vaccine. That's just a magic wand that's coming in.
Well, here's the other thing that is very troubling. In the same press conference, he also said that he had been on the World Health Organization weekly call. And they were all in the consensus that this was likely to come back in the fall and next spring, and maybe it'll be a yearly issue for the human population. If this is the case, it behooves me, in my mind, to get to herd immunity as fast as we can.
Well, no, but that's what the antibody showing is going to show you. Okay, we had a little music cue there. Got a few seconds left. We're going to come back and continue this partners discussion. Remember, there's no fighting in the war room. Okay, we're going to come back. War room pandemic. Back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
This is episode 95, and the previous episode is 94. You're in the room. I want to make sure your minds will be a little messed up today as you listen to this later. But we're live having a throwdown here about what actually is going on and what needs to go on. What we're doing is pulling for the country, obviously pulling for the Trump administration. We're big backers, but we want to give some, constructive observations, right? Number one, you've got to get a set of government numbers out. We cannot be depending upon solely these independent universities. They're doing great jobs, but we need. I want to know what CDC thinks. I want to know what NIH thinks. I want to know what Dr. Fauci's numbers are. We need to define. We're going to get to the second. What full mitigation? If you're telling me full mitigation gets me, and it's going to take 2 months, I want to know what's the defined full mitigation. Full mitigation is not that. I can guarantee you, and we're going to talk about how that's defined throughout the world. And number three, we got to find out what the goals and objectives are for the war, because the complete eradication means no deaths and no new cases is just not feasible. It's just not feasible. It's not that's probably not going to happen. And I don't think it's constructive for Dr. Fauci to be talking about second and third waves. We got to get through this first wave. Okay? We got to get through this first wave. We can figure out the second and third waves later, but you got to get through this now. And you got to be definitional. My problem from the beginning is the moving of the goalposts. We got to bang the goalposts in, say this is where you score a touchdown, right there. Okay? So we know when we have to move the chains. Every day we have to move the chains. We are burning daylight, and we don't have unlimited. The Federal Reserve, when David Bahnsen, who wrote the best book on Elizabeth Warren, on Pocahontas, right, on her policies, when he says we're becoming the United States of the Federal Reserve, we basically are. I mean, and not that we can't unwind that, and not that we didn't need to do that in an emergency. Because that's what it's here. It's a break-the-glass emergency moment. But it can't be part of this. And if you just drag this thing out and out and out and out, you're going to bleed out the country. And so that's why we're 30 Days to Save America. We're hardcore, and we're proud we're hardcore. Okay? We've been writing on this thing since we started doing this in January. Anybody should go back and look at any podcast, Media Matters, get on any podcast, go through, show we've been wrong on anything. Okay? We haven't. I don't want to sit here and brag. I'm saying a matter of, that's no brag, just fact.
I got one.
Right. Go ahead.
The episode number.
Here, I've got a kind of sunshine.
By our former producer, Vish Burra.
I've got a sort of sunshine story that I think illustrates what we've been trying to do.
Okay, give it to us.
It's real quick. We've been talking about all these alternative treatments, and we've been sharing the best research that we can gather from around the world. And I got a text message yesterday from someone I know who watches the show, and she said, "Do you know that I know about hydroxychloroquine from you? And my sister-in-law had family friends in Italy. All of them got sick. The uncle, older one, got in the hospital. I told her about it, and I sent her the data that you sent me. She sent them all the info. He got better with the hydroxychloroquine and is out of the hospital. A direct save with many more you guys won't know about."
Yeah, but listen, we're not here. We're not selling. We don't have newsletters selling drugs. We're not selling a jar of silver drink that's. We're not in that business. Okay, that's not us. Okay, we don't do that. You got and this therapeutic is not perfect, and it's got some dangers, particularly if you got certain health things. You got to make that decision yourself with your physician. But certainly, when you're break the glass and you're using every tool in the tool shed, and I guarantee you, we're going to find out in New York, because that's what worked up in New Rochelle and to save that Hasidic community from being decimated. Right, we're going to find out the reason you see in so few ICU units. The difference in the Delta and the ICU units in New York, we're going to find out eventually, it was because Governor Cuomo and the team up there used everything at their disposal to fight this, which you have to.
Look, it's very clear right now that if you've been following this closely from the very beginning and you've been reading the studies, take the Imperial College study at the very beginning of this, there are different distinctions and definitions, and those are ever changing because there isn't and hasn't been typical playbook for this all around the world. Different governments taking different approaches, and the phrase mitigation means different things to different people at this point. You know, in certain places in the United States, the governor of Michigan has just said that there's going to be no face-to-face learning in schools K through 12 until the next school year, right? That's not this. This 30 days to slow the spread thing says if your children are sick, keep them at home, do not send them to school. This is outdated already. But what's becoming very clear is that Dr. Fauci is actually moving to a mental position where he believes in something further than mitigation. He believes in suppression. Now, suppression is 18 months of this, is 18 months social distancing, stay at home, all of this stuff. That's the definition as it was used originally, and that's what he said yesterday. A journalist in the White House press briefing needs to ask the question today, if Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci are on the same page here, because she's talking about mitigation, which means 30 days, 40 days, maybe even up to 60 days, mitigation, full mitigation, right? And we'll get to full mitigation at some point, but we're not there right now.
I want to play the...
But
going.
we just need to understand if Dr. Fauci is now saying, contrary to New York information that's coming out right now, and contrary to all the things that are taking place around the country, if he's moving to, hey, this 30 days isn't going to work, we're moving into an 18-month
hang on a
strategy.
second.
We need to know that.
We'll get to the congressman on the CCP tomorrow because I want to take some time on that. What I want is get Pelosi, if you got it, but I want to come back to you. What did Imperial College, what do they call suppression when it defined that? What was suppression?
Suppression is dealing with this over the course of 18 months or until a vaccine is found. Suppression is saying that nobody's going to schools, nobody's going to universities, colleges, nobody's going to sporting events, nothing like, you're not standing within 2 feet of somebody for 18 months.
The antibodies, the finding out what we've offered immunity is going to solve part of this because you're going to find out that this has gone through part of the population. The antibody tests, which we got to get up and fully distributed, right, through universities or however we do it, to find out mass testing of the entire population of the United States of America to find out because that's going to give you the ability to start to unlock. We only got a minute left. Can we play the Master Political Strategist?
At the same time, I am announcing the formation of a bipartisan committee to be chaired by Majority Whip Jim Clyburn. It's called the House Select Committee on the Coronavirus Crisis. Be in touch with our committee chairs and our leadership and of course, the Republican leadership. This is a House Select Committee.
Okay, that is not to be supportive of actions to get this done. That is basically, I don't want to say witch hunt because I don't like to use that word loosely. But this, Jason, Raheem, Jack, what do you guys define this as?
Witch hunt.
Witch hunt.
Okay, until 5 o'clock today.
Sedition.
Until 5 o'clock today on WABC and all of our distribution platforms. War Room Pandemic. Send us all your thoughts and hashtag War Room Pandemic. I want to see what you guys are thinking. See you at 5.